A lot of us spend years moving from job to job, often not realizing we're heading nowhere specific. We chase the next title, the next pay rise, the next opportunity without having a real clear idea about what it is we're trying to achieve in our career. But if you stop, even for just a few hours, and ask yourself what you want to achieve, is it to create personal wealth? Is it to save the world? Is it to make a difference to humanity? We would begin to connect the dots. You could think about the skills, the experiences, and the stepping stones that will move you closer to your goal. That's exactly what my guest today, Bruce Pannaman, has built a framework for. It's a map to help you be more deliberate with your career, to make a set of decisions that compound, and to give yourself the best chance of turning your ambitions into reality. So if you want to take control, be more intentional, and actually reach your career goals, this episode is for you. Let's get into it. Bruce, hi, welcome. Thank you for joining us today. Now, you've built a career in technology and mostly inside startups, but you've taken the time to put together a framework to help anybody else who wants to have a career in technology to think about what it is they want to do and then how they can reach their end goals. What made you come up with this?
Thank you very much for having me on the show, Jeremy. Great to spend some time with you. So this really came from a place of reflecting where we are in the tech industry at the moment. You know, we had an extraordinary high in 2022 around COVID times. Loads of people getting jobs. It was very much like a employees market, and things are very, very different now. Interest rates have gone up, so therefore VC funding is down. Startups can't get as easy capital or kind of free money anymore. Therefore, you know, the career side is different. Then you've got the rise of AI, meaning that different junior jobs are changing. So in this ever evolving tech job landscape, you get sort of weathering periods like this. And looking at the market, speaking to other people in my network who are kind of transitioning through jobs at the moment, it made me think about the short term feels really easy to just go out and get something quickly. It feels a bit desperate right now. But if you take into account the longer term and really build these different jobs together into a path that will get you what you ultimately want through your life, kind of not just tech, but any other industry, think what you actually want from your career. It's a really interesting way to think about it and to plan and build a strategy long term for how you're going to get what you want out of your career.
So it sounds like you're saying instead of just get the next job, next job, next job, actually think of them as stepping stones, which takes you progressively closer to a goal that you have fixed for yourself.
Yes, completely. There's lots of different, it's not just steps and how you kind of build that experience, it's the skills you get along the way, and also the types of people in your network that you'd meet along the way that help you at those different stages as well. So being in the right place to pick up those skills, to pick up those people into your network is really important.
Yeah, we hear a lot, don't we, about networking, but I think not a lot of people are very deliberate about actually building up their network. It's just sort of maybe a couple of people they've worked with, a few people they've met. But again, you're saying be quite strategic about how you build that network up.
Yes, I think this is particularly prevalent for the people who are at the beginning of their career. You hear about graduates all the time saying, "I need the experience to get the job, but I need the job to get the experience."
Mm.
For me, I think this is a symptom of not having that network and not having built it, because you can't use your network to get that foot in the door and to be able to get that starting position. Or sometimes when you want to pivot careers and change around, you also need that network to be able to kind of advise you, mentor you, give you, show you where those opportunities are in that new space that you're going for.
Right. And why is it important to set yourself some kind of a medium or long term career goal, somewhere where you want to end up? Why is that important?
I think in tech, it's one of those unique jobs where everything changes around you all the time. You know, you kind of get a degree, and some of the technologies you'll be using in your first year will be completely relevant in the industry or moving out from the industry by the time you get to your final year. So the major skill you need to have a long and happy tech career is to be able to evolve and go through those different stages, pick up new technologies, look at what skills and what frameworks and stuff are going to be really useful, which ones are going to take off, which ones aren't, and just having that curious mindset to be able to pick them up and try different things. So within that, again, between different jobs, and I think, people hop between jobs a lot at the moment. You can kind of see, around 2 years is the average that people stay in one particular job. With all of this change and all this happening, it's very easy for that to just happen to you and for you to just passively walk through it. But the more purposeful you are and the more deliberate you are with it, the more likely you are to achieve what you ultimately wanted when you came into the world of work in the very first place.
Right. And um, at the moment, of course, the job market is very tough. So a lot of
Yeah.
people just want to get another job, maybe because they've been laid off, which is happening a lot. So, to what degree can they exercise some choice and be quite deliberate about the next thing, as opposed to, look, I've just been laid off, I've been off for 3 months, and now I need a job. Here's one that's available to me. I'll just take it.
Yeah, it's a very good point. And, this is very theoretical and most likely will not play into the actual practicalities of what happens. People have responsibilities, people have bills to pay. There are short-term needs on people's prospects and what they want. So I'm not taking away from those at all. For people that really work on their skill set, work on their experience, hopefully when people do go look for a new job, they'll have some choices. They'll be successful in a few different interview processes, and then it comes to that decision of which one do I take? And hopefully there's some people who are in that very lucky position. Um, at that point, you kind of think, do I just go for the one with the most money? Where do I go for the one that's going to open up my career the most? Do I go for the one where loads of my friends are already working at? All of those are correct answers. It just depends whether you really understand and know what you want from it and how, if you have got loftier career ambitions, really understanding how that's going to get you there.
And as someone who has interviewed a lot of people, I think you can smell that when you get this sense of, I'm not just looking for a job, but this is the path I'm on. And I see the skills that I bring to you as an employer are very relevant to you, but also the experience and the exposure to different things that you will bring me as an employee will help me progress. You can sense that. And I think that makes the candidate a richer prospect.
I agree, but at the same time, it's also really good to see that level of honesty. If somebody comes in and says, the thing that's really important to them is what that salary is, or what's really important is what the impact of the company is. The more forthright they are with that, the more you can understand what really drives them, what they're going for, and what will make a difference to them. And then you can make sure, if you're usually, in my experience, if you're the hiring manager, you're also going to be their manager when they join. It's really important that you know what motivates them. You understand what they're getting from it, what will make them happy in their job, and therefore what will, help them to perform. Which, as their new manager in their new job, is one of the roles you have.
So, like every guest, you've brought with you something that the audience can later on download. Now, we've been speaking a lot about technology because that's what both you and me are in, but presumably everything that you have put together, the structure will apply to pretty much any career, not just technology.
Yes. I think what's really important to note here with this artifact that I'm leaving is that it's an example purely based off my experience, and then you've kind of fed into it as well, Jeremy. So thank you for that. There's many other careers out there. There's many other ways to build up, what you've done in your life's work, and there's many extra options that are available. So what I would really like people to take away from this is this way of thinking and strategizing how what you're building, the skills you've got, the experience you've got can build into something which you ultimately want. But there's many other options out there, and if anyone wants to comment and give some other options, that'd be very great.
Yeah, great. So let's walk it through at a very, very high level to begin with, because it's a structure, isn't it? It starts at the top
Yeah.
with a big question, and then you progressively go deeper, and it exposes ideas and thoughts, and then practical steps that you can take in order to progress your career. So you start off with the question, which is, what outcomes do you want from your career? Why is it important to start with that big question?
I think it's really important to think about what you want in the end of it, because this is what you're going to end up with. Yeah, hopefully after a very long, very happy career, you're going to reach the end of it and look back and be really proud of what you've done, what you've achieved. So to get to that point, it's really important that you have an idea of what you think is going to be something you're going to be proud of, something that is going to give you that joy that you can look back on, through your golden years or potentially through your second career, to know that you've kind of really owned that first one. It's also something which allows you to move between careers. So you might have, start in tech for 10, 15 years, and people then transition to other things and do something completely different. And you can still apply this thinking across and still apply these outcomes that you want across literally every industry.
And you then move, once you've asked or answered that question for yourself, you then go into a set of outcomes. They are money, recognition, autonomy, creating world changing software, saving the world, and helping others succeed. So, what are they? What do you mean by outcomes?
So the outcome is it's the what if of what you do. Like, so what? Um, you can do different things in many different ways in many different roles, but what changes in the world because you've done that? Is it your own personal wealth? Is it the fact that a difference has been made to the environment of our planet and how we can change the impact of humanity on that planet, for example? Or is it the impact on people, how their lives can be made better? These are all things which, as I said, span across multiple different industries, but they're high level enough that you can set a goal for yourself, really understand what you want from yourself, and then drive across it in many different experiences and many different examples.
I understand. So, once you've picked that outcome, the thing that you want to see come real, you that then helps you pick your next stage, and you then talk about your eventual career strategy.
Yeah, I mean, these are interchangeable, so you can have more than one. And also, it allows you to see what's compatible and what's not with it. So, as a tool, one of the strengths of this is, let's say you wanted to create world-changing software, yet you work for a very kind of corporate company, someone that's kind of very safe, very close product market fit that they've got in a very like big corporate world. You might not be able to do that. There might not be that level of innovation there, which is absolutely fine for somebody else who, potentially wants that stability or kind of wants that scale of impact that that big corporate can provide. It shows, of those jobs you can go for, of those things you can apply for, or those career routes you can go down, how compatible that is with those outcomes that ultimately make you you, and it's something you can be proud of.
So, very simplistically, then, if my say that I want to create world, or if I want to change the world in some way, if I want to do some kind of like community good, working for a corporate company that is literally just building banking software is never really going to take me towards my end goal. And therefore, that helps inform what my next career step should
Yeah.
be.
I mean, of course, I'll count that by probably some. That's my some might be an exception to the rule, so that's not like a full-on rule. But yeah, in general, that might be the case, or something to at
Right.
least consider looking at when you're going down that route.
Yep. And then the next thing you do is you say, um, in order to progress down this path, you're going to need what you call a set of superpowers. What do you mean by that?
So superpowers are essentially skill sets or personality traits. A lot of them can be learned, a lot of them can be built on and kind of gained through experience. So these superpowers are things that you really excel at, things that give you energy, things that you can really push forward. This would be things like kind of softer skills like leadership or decision making, really high quality decision making, or very technical things like using the latest technologies and applications, full stack technology, web applications, mobile applications, AI, whatever it is. There's technical skills, whole of non-technical skills, and everything else that goes along with how you interact with other people, how you look at a particular problem, and where your energy and where your strength are best placed to be able to attack that given outcome.
Right. And those superpowers will vary depending on the path that you're going down.
In this framework, yes, I think they're very interchangeable, which is why they're repeated quite a lot against different things. But it's providing that focus. It's the aim of this section is to provide the must-haves. If there's things like, understanding user problems and the user space, and you find that a lot of effort, and it's really, really hard, probably going to be harder for you to achieve down that route, or you're not going to enjoy it very much. So it's aligning what gives you that energy with what will contribute to achieving those goals.
Right. So it might even help to skip forward from the very beginning question right the way down to the superpowers and say what resonates with me most, because that might
Yeah.
then help me pick the path I'm most likely to be successful at.
Yeah, that's a very good point. And yeah, I think it's almost like with the job description, you look at kind of what those duties are, what those skills are that you need. You read down them when you're going for a job and you think, oh, I could do that, I could do that, I can't do that. It's like that, but a much higher level for a given career track, not necessarily a job role, which is why I've
Yeah.
designed it this way. Hopefully that's useful.
Right. Yep. And then the very final step is that you say, here are some common stepping stones, you call them, which I guess are the beginning part almost. Once I've picked it, here's my stepping stones to get into that path.
Yeah, I mean, these are very much based in my experience, my personal experience, but these are essentially the ways that I've seen people get into that space, or places that I've understood is the way to get into that space. So, when we spoke about the beginning, we talked about getting your foot in that door, getting that first bit of experience so you can show someone else the potential. Here are some examples of ways that you can build that, gain that experience, and kind of show others ways that you have built that experience and you are capable of going down that route.
Right. And it occurs to me that although you've got this framework and you have filled in the boxes, you've put in the words and the values, it's
Mhm.
actually not a bad approach for anybody just to go, okay, well, let me ask a question, let me think about some possibilities and put in their own words and create their own
Yeah.
template based on what they know.
Yeah, completely agree. This is the whole idea. It's more of a template that I've kind of filled in with my personal experience compared to others. So, when advice I'd give is take all this with a pinch of salt, and then if you've got a mentor in your particular space or somebody that's seen your particular space, this could be a really good conversation to kind of sit down, have a catch up or a coffee with, to kind of go, what does this framework look like in our space? What's your experience? And fill in those extra gaps for yourself, and
Yeah.
potentially highlight what really excites you about the next 10 years of your career and what could be quite exciting to go into yourself.
Let's get into the content now. There's way too much for us to go through everything that you've put down on the framework in one brief, half-hour podcast. Um, Please download the full asset and you can view it yourself. So what we're going to do is we're going to go through just one of the columns, one track, and it's the career track, which is about money. And that's relevant to you because you are in the startup world and you've identified that you would like to generate personal wealth, which is not at all uncommon. So
Mm.
if someone's got the same idea, if someone's thinking, generating some wealth is really the most important thing to me, where do they start with your framework?
So when you go down this particular money track, it's called money, but it could be wealth. It could be lots of different things that kind of exist in it. But essentially, people that come out and think a tech career, I want to go into that because I want to get rich. What
Hmm.
does that look like? How do you achieve that? So one of the first basic questions that's kind of added to this is around risk appetite. And this is really, really important because, different levels of risk appetite open or close different doors. This has got to be something you're proud of. This has got to be something that gives you energy, not something that stresses you out and ends up with loads of sleepless nights and all your hair goes grey. So it's important to get the right mix and to make sure that you do get this energy from it instead of it kind of pulling you down. So depending on that, there's a couple of different options where you can kind of end up going into big tech. Where there's some big salaries knocking about. If you kind of look up, very, very poignant with what's going on in the industry with AI at the moment, you look at Anthropic's job roles at the moment, you can see those are exceptionally high for the space. You can also go deeper into being very deep into a specific specialism. So kind of become that industry expert in a particular space. And then you kind of write different stuff with people, you end up being the expert. Or you can go down another route and build your own startup, which kind of takes quite a big risk appetite, but some people absolutely love it, and some people get lots of energy from it.
Yeah. So you've got these eventual destinations,
Mm.
and when you say I'd like to make money, it's not just one way, right? There are lots of
Yeah,
different options. And as you say, the risk appetite, if you go and join a startup, potentially very lucrative, but equally you could be flat broke in 7 months and the
yeah,
company could go out of business. That's the nature of the business. So
yeah.
people are going to ask themselves questions about their risk appetite and a few other things. And then they will narrow down on one of the routes. Now let's pick the startup route because that's where you're at. What next?
So when you go down that startup route, I think, as I said at the beginning, there is a mix here. And I think very particular to this startup route, it's also quite linked to the impact you want to make. Because startups aren't just about making lots of money. I heard a stat once that said that the probability of robbing a bank and getting away with it is infinitely higher than your startup being a success. If you
I'll
just
go. I'll go and give it a go this afternoon. Let's see how that goes.
yeah. So yeah, you're not, the chances and the statistics are against you just for going to start up just to make money. You need to have a really good problem that you understand. You need to be passionate about that problem, and you need to have the curiosity and have the energy to become an expert in that space so that you can really understand it and make something of it, and also gain lots of pride and lots of energy, intrinsically from the fact that you're solving that for people. So, to your question around kind of what's the next steps after that, the superpowers that are kind of underneath this particular track, it goes down to risk appetite as well. 1 in 10 startups succeed, and 9 out of 10 of them fail. So, therefore, there's a very high failure rate here. Therefore, if you are quite loss averse, if you have quite a low risk appetite, this might not be a route for you. But if you haven't, that's this exciting thing. This is high stakes career strategy right here. The other thing you need is really strong decision making. You need to be able to make judgment calls. Sometimes you won't have all the data that's there. Sometimes you won't have a full set of information to make the best decision, but you've got to be able to make the best decision at the time with the information you have, because this is what keeps things going. This is how you keep moving forward. Once you get after the kind of initial startup phases, building people around you, whether that's advisors, whether that's board members, whether that's investors, whether that's staff around you, being able to lead other people in that direction, inspire other people is the other key thing that you need here. So a really good sense of leadership, understanding people, aligning people with what they are trying, what you're trying to achieve, and making sure that gives them the energy as well. And then the last of many, but I just kind of kept it to four for this particular example, is patience, research skills. Never stop, researching and trying to find out what that underlying problem is. Because especially in tech, when you come from a technical background, it's very easy to just build stuff, but that's not the point here. Technology is a tool to be able to solve the problem, not just be something in itself. So it's that whole, if you have a hammer, everything's a nail. It looks like a nail problem.
Yeah, I fully agree with that. You see a lot of technical people building technology for the sake of building technology, and they lose track of anything to do with the customer or even anything to do with being a business. They never turn a penny. And of course, we're talking here about it. It sounds to me like you're saying this is if that's what appeals to you, you may start your own startup. But of course, you could also join a startup at
Yeah.
different stages, either as a founder or one of the early employees, or even when it's a couple of years in. And there will be different decision points which point you towards which one you're going to go for.
Yeah, that's it. Loads of people do that. Kind of, you hear about founding engineers as a role, and at that point, it's maximum ambiguity, maximum risk, but at the same time, you do get to go in and you get to kind of share all those duties a little bit more. I think when you do your own startup, you kind of have to hold every single hat at some point or other, whether that's, customer service sometimes, whether that's marketing sometimes, finance, technology, you're kind of doing everything. Whereas if you join that little bit afterwards, you do get to refine down and specialize a little bit earlier, but there's probably will still be lots of hats to do. And it's quite exciting as well.
Hmm. And of course, things like if work-life harmony is important to you, becoming a founder kind of rules that out, right? Because you're 24/7, you're founding the business and doing everything to do with it. Whereas if you join a big corporate, for example, you can reasonably do a 9 to 5 or an 8 to 6. and then have more of a personal life?
I don't think it's as black and white as that. I think you're going to be thinking about it 24/7, but you do need to be the most energized person in that room. You need to be the person, that inspires everyone else and keeps everyone else super excited. So if you are so low on energy, that you can't keep yourself motivated, and in your personal life, there's friends, family, other things that kind of recharge you. It's important to make sure that you bring that energy every single day. So having, making sure that you do have that family around it, involving them as well, because they're part of the journey, whether they like it or not.
Yeah,
Um, it's important to make sure that you do get some breaks, because that's also when those moments of inspiration come along. You keep battling against the problem for 6 hours straight. If you just go home, spend an hour or two watching something chilled on TV, and you might think, oh, that's a great idea, let's do this, but you
yeah,
wouldn't have really got there unless you had taken a tiny break. But I do
yeah.
completely agree about thinking about it 24/7.
Yeah.
It's quite an obsessive mindset.
And it's amazing how the brain does work, isn't it? Because you can give it a problem and you can, as you say, struggle to work it out, go and do something completely different, switch off, and the brain goes, okay, I've got some space. And then you're just walking along the street, it goes, bing, there's the answer.
Yeah. Um, it's the networking side as well, speaking to people, understanding things, being in touch with it. So, you can go, if you go and have coffees with loads and loads of people, you end up super wired. And it's very, in terms of how you spend your time and how you invest your time, you can get, it's a very important person, or it's somebody that's got lots of insights, loads for you to learn. It's a very useful place to put it. But to go a bit more broad and to make sure you're getting a wide view of what's happening, other things like listening to podcasts, reading blogs, reading publications, trying to absorb as much different information as possible. Sometimes that can be done whilst you're relaxing as well.
Yeah. So you've identified the superpowers that you will need in order to be successful at this particular path. Your next stage is the common stepping stones. What do they look like for this money route?
Um, so for this money route, there's quite a few depending on which track you're going down. So, but for this specific startup route, the kind of examples I've given, and again, there are many, many others. We're really interested to hear everyone else's opinion on that. The first one is really about having that unfair advantage in the problem space. I listened to a really interesting podcast recently from a VC that was saying he knows if they're going to invest by the first sentence, but if they start with "we're building dot dot dot," or
Mm,
"the problem we're solving is dot dot dot." If it's "we're building," very rarely does that lead to investment. It needs to be that problem space. So, you know, the real key to success here is knowing something that other people don't. So this comes from being in the space yourself, being personally impacted by that particular user problem you're trying to solve, or being in the industry that you're trying to innovate from. It's very hard to completely come into a new industry from scratch, understand in enough detail to know what the problem you're trying to solve. Sometimes you'll have co-founders which come with that experience, and you'll come with some of the execution experience to be able to actually deliver on it and go down that journey. But engaging with it, having people around you or having that experience yourself in the problem space is super important. So for instance, if you decide you really want to go into, I don't know, prop tech, having some sort of experience in the property space or having some sort of network in that property space is really important, so that you can test your hypothesis, so that you can understand what is going on, and you can understand that user problem enough to start experimenting with things to solve it.
so that's your first stepping stone for this particular route, which is to be really close to the problem space. And I agree with you. We've talked about it before, but if you're literally just building technology, not likely to be successful. But if you're actually solving a problem, much more likely to be successful. What's the
Agreed.
second stepping stone?
So the next one is also about kind of being in that startup ecosystem. Um, what this means is that the real race that you're going down is to experiment and find a solution to that problem that your startup's trying to solve. So whether that's a product that people are willing to buy, whether that's something that works and actually can show some results against that problem, you kind of need to be able to get there and iterate very, very quickly. So at that point, it's the tools, it's the tricks, it's those kind of, whenever you hear about growth hacking, this is the sort of space that we're in. I know that's a bit sort of 2 years ago, but it's that level of thinking that we're at. So this is really, my experience is really important to be in those startups, to kind of be in those small 5, 10 person startups where you can see how they can execute, you can experience how they overcome these problems, how they make that balance between moving fast and moving for the long term at those very early stages. There isn't necessarily a long term yet, so it's about moving fast and not getting too stuck in the details. But that obviously changes very quickly as soon as you kind of start growing. Um, and then the communities as well. I think from the times that I have been in these companies, there's some really good communities out there which are very supportive. I have lots of people that have all, most of the time always been through the sort of thing you're going through. Who can give you that advice, give you that mentorship, and kind of help you skip ahead of that without trying to reinvent the wheel on that particular issue you're trying to solve that week.
What's the opposite of that? So I understand what you mean by, get into the startup ecosystem. And I
Mm.
guess if that's your destination, you're going to go that way. But what if someone's listening or watching and they're thinking, yeah, but I'm not in that space? What's the opposite of that look like? Is it that I'm currently working for some huge enterprise and I'm just not exposing myself to that world?
I think it can be, but I think that's quite generalistic. I think it's a mindset of speed versus quality and making sure that you can align yourself along that spectrum. In a very generalistic sense, sometimes you have big companies that have much more stringent development guidelines, which is really important at that scale because it's what aligns everyone. It means that everyone can drive in the same direction. So it's very important at that stage, and it's completely valid. At a much much smaller stage, there's a lot less structure, and there's a much smaller org to kind of move along, keep aligned. So you don't need that much structure, both in terms of how you're coding and how you're architecting, but also how you run the business as well.
I heard a really good expression some years back, which was scrappy, not crappy. So you never
Yeah,
want to produce something which is crap because clearly that's not right. But it comes back to this risk appetite thing, doesn't it? Where you've got to be prepared to put something out which is not perfect and not rounded. It gets the job done, looks a bit scrappy, but you can try it and you can test it. And if it's
yeah.
worth it, then you can come back and polish it up. But if you're the kind of person that only ever wants to put out perfection, you probably don't sit very well in the startup land.
No, but you need to understand that as well. I mean, one thing that I'm very much enjoying myself in my career at the moment is being on that kind of other side now. I'm not a huge company by any stretch, but it's really looking at that quality and that technical excellence, what that looks like. So I find both quite exciting, but I think what I'm talking about here is understanding what's appropriate when and
Yeah.
what tool is the best tool to use to achieve your goal.
Yeah. And I think if you're sort of 2 weeks into a startup and you're trying to work out if you should be monolith or microservices, you're probably thinking about the wrong things.
Completely, because it's at a small scale. If you build it quickly enough, you can rebuild it quickly enough as well, and there isn't as much sitting on top of it. There'll be a
Yeah.
dependency, but it won't be. The chance of pivoting away from that to do something completely different are quite high at that point.
Yeah.
So it's not
Focus
about.
on solving the problem and delivering value rather than the technical structure. So what's the
Yeah.
third step? You've got 3 steps. What's the third and final step here?
So the third one is kind of linked to both of them, where it's really about making sure you have that strong connection to it. Um, if things go well, you're going to be battling against this problem for years on end, and there's going to be one of the biggest journeys of your life. And you need to make sure you enjoy it. You need to make sure that you have that strong connection and you are a true advocate of it. If it's something, going all the way up to the very top, where if your goal is you want to be really wealthy, you can't achieve that by just doing this. You have to really care about the space you're in, the problem you're solving, because it's a huge marathon, and keeping the energy to go along that, you're not going to be able to. Well, most people probably can't motivate themselves down that purely based on what the outcome of just pure money can be along that way.
Cool. So I want to recap, but in reverse order, really. So you have your stepping stones, which are the things you really kind of need to do. It's quite practical, it sounds to me. Then before that, you've got the superpowers that you must be able to call on. And if you haven't got those superpowers, question whether you're in the right track or not. Then you've got your eventual career destination. and before that, you've got your outcomes that you're trying to achieve. Is that fair?
Yes, I think so. That's a very, very quick summarization.
Good. Thank you. So, like we said a few times here, this doesn't just cover technology tracks. If I'm listening and I'm in a completely different business, let's say I'm in, I don't know, finance, for argument's sake, something very, very different, how could I take your framework and build something which is applicable for me in that career?
I think the kind of top level outcomes are relatively similar. And it's kind of a common branching point across all of them. Once you get into the career destinations, this is where you really kind of need to understand, for example, that finance space. You kind of need to know who the different players are, how careers branch out. And my advice is, some people have this experience already and be able to just have the benefit of putting it down on paper. Some people, reach into mentoring networks, reach into your friends or people that have been in the industry for a little while to kind of ask their opinion of what these look like. So, people who've been in an industry for a decent amount of time will have a good idea here. Um, then at that point, that conversation will keep going. To find those superpowers, you can start to see these patterns if you start looking at those type of job sites and job descriptions of these particular places and these situational career destinations. So it's finding those patterns in there. Recruiters could be really useful here as well. If you have a recruiter you're speaking to or somebody that's kind of in the job space, ask the question, what sort of thing do you need? What are you seeing in the industry that's needed to get into this particular career or this particular type of company? And they'll be looking over which candidates are successful, which ones aren't. So they'll have a really good idea and it'd be quite a real-time sense of what the industry is wanting at the moment. And that's kind of how you fill in your superpowers. And then the common stepping stones, I think these are quite open. I think these change quite a lot. So I'm imagining you kind of put this artifact up, and I imagine it's probably going to be out of date within a year. So this is really about kind of understanding and seeing those examples. So a idea here to find these is if you look at people who are deep into these different avenues, you find them on LinkedIn, look down their profile. How did they start? How did they move across these different jobs to get there? What positions did they have? And what were the size of companies they're at, or the kind of the industries these companies were in? Is there any patterns you can find there? You can even, if you find a particularly good route, or if you find somebody's career path who's really inspiring, reach out and ask if you can speak to them more. They might say yes, and you'd get a really detailed insight, inside track on how they think the next generation of people can get to their position.
Fantastic. And what's the first thing that somebody should do? So they feel fired up by what you've been talking about, and they like the idea of setting a longer term direction and understanding the steps to getting there. What's the first thing they should do with your framework?
I think the first thing is to start at the top. If you haven't got it already, have a really good idea of what you want from your career, a really good idea of where it's leading and what will enable you to look back and be really proud of it. And that's different for everyone. And each individual person's choice is perfectly valid and is very personal. So it's up to you. If you don't know this, kind of, it's worth doing some self-exploration to kind of think what motivated me to do the steps I've done already. If you're a fresh graduate, you kind of think what motivated me to do the degree I've done in the first place. Think about the best work and kind of the things you're really proud of so far. What drove you to go want to be able to do that in the first place? And that can help you get started to kind of work out. And as I said, it's not just one, you could have a mix of these as well.
And it's interesting that your framework doesn't mention Java or Kubernetes or monolith or anything. It's absolutely not technical. It's all about picking the path and moving in the right direction rather than becoming super good at a technology.
I think sometimes it's valid to get really good at that technology because being the kind of world-renowned Kubernetes expert takes a lot of time and a lot of effort and a lot of skill. And that some people who are at that position feel so happy in their lives and they absolutely love it. So I think that is a particular way to go. But driving down to those particular skill sets as the goal itself. being an expert in something, a world-renowned expert in something is great, but what particular thing it is, it changes all the time. Technology moves on, industries move on. So it's important to keep reevaluating this every now and again to kind of say, is the world still going in this particular space? Is this still realistic for me to look at? And adjust it as much as needed.
Yeah, and one of your outcomes is the distinguished engineer type
Mm.
path, where you are just the super king in some sort of a technology within a company, and that that's driven by technical knowledge.
Mm.
But I guess as a more generalistic point that I'm trying to say, I think a lot of people think I need to get better at technology in order that I can progress, and for sure you do. But if that's all you do, you're limiting your potential.
Yeah. There's if you want to go down that route, you can, but you're limiting and closing off some other doors too.
So finally, to wrap up, Bruce, um, who is this for? Who should bother looking at the framework and working out where they're going or what they should do next?
Good question. So when I was putting this together, the people I was really targeting is people who are either at the beginning of their career and kind of thinking, right, I've got the degree, what next? I read all the time about entry level positions, how they're really hard to get into. I kind of look at the dearth of junior positions that are out there. I imagine there's quite a few people really struggling to kind of get some direction there. So hopefully this framework gives you something to be able to build on, something to hopefully be a bit more long term with your thinking. The other type of people are people who are feeling quite stuck in their careers, people that have kind of gone down a certain route and aren't particularly happy with it, but don't know why, wishes they'd taken some other choices, and kind of thinking, where did I go wrong? How did I end up here? What other decision could I have made? And the other part of it is a lot of these kind of career directions take a lot of time and a lot of patience. So to keep motivated and to kind of say, look, I've been doing this for a couple of years. Why should I keep doing it for another couple of years? Be able to use this, get a realization for actually, you compound this together. This could lead potentially somewhere much, much bigger. And if they can get real excited about that, that will kind of help build that motivation to be able to go even further.
And is it ever too late?
I don't think so. Um, I think there's many other options here than what I've put down. So there might be some that you can do quite late on. There's some that you can do really early. I think it's about exploring and adapting to your circumstances, what motivates you, and how the industry and the world is changing around you.
Yeah, I mean, as people get near the end of their career, they begin to think about things like board positions. So, what does that
Mm.
mean? What do I need? What's the
Yeah.
eventual destination? Why am I even doing it? So, there's all sorts of questions you can ask all the way along the track. So, we're going to make this framework available on buildyouredge.org/downloads. You can go there and find the framework. You'll also find more details about this episode. But what if somebody wants to talk to you personally, Bruce, about it in a bit more detail? Where do they get hold of you?
Feel free to add me on LinkedIn, send me a message. Be great to chat there and hear all of your opinions and anything else you feel should be added.
Great. So thank you, Bruce. I always thank people not just for the time they spend, here recording the episode, but also all of the planning. And I know that you and me have spoken several times and you've planned really hard for this. So thank you so much indeed for that. What I found really interesting about this is that, I'm towards the end of my career, not the beginning of my career. So I'm able to look at this with a bit of retrospect and say, would this have helped? Does it relate? Can I see that things have played out pretty much as you have described? And my answer is yes. And I wish that I'd had this when I was younger, because I think it would have helped me be a bit more focused. I think, like a lot of people, you tend to just say, I think you maybe chase titles. Like, I know that I'm this, my next title should be this, my next title should be that, but there's more to it than that. I don't think I ever really thought about what am I really trying to achieve. So how do I evaluate whether that next job is truly taking me where I want to go, other than a bigger title and a bit more money? So I think this is a really, really useful approach. I think a lot of people could do really well by just downloading it and looking it through, and then just applying the thinking on where they are now, where they've been, because I think they'd experience what I did, but also where they want to go next.
Completely agree. Thanks so much for having me on, Jeremy. It's great to discuss it with you.
You're welcome. Thank you so much indeed, Bruce. And if you're listening or watching, please go to buildyouredge.org/downloads, download Bruce's framework, and why not put it into practice this afternoon? Thank you very much. Next time. Bye-bye.